Do you want an efficient, high-range, off-road electric pickup truck? Yeah, that sounds awesome! Would you like it to have 4 independent motors and a 0 to 60 time of 3 seconds? Oh my god, yes! Well, pick one. I wasn't saying you could have both. Just which one do you want? Oh, okay. I guess the more range, I suppose. Range matters more than acceleration. Yeah, okay. But when are you gonna want this vehicle? I'd like it as soon as possible. Right now, maybe? Okay, well, then you're gonna need the quad motor, because we're starting with the quad motor. So, please, take the faster one, please. Prefer that. Okay, cool. Is there a way I can get the higher range, or... No. Okay, yeah. Range is overrated anyway. I'm going off-road, yeah, so, okay, you go off-road. But do any new people want the longer range? Rivian, unfortunately, had a bit of a bumpy earnings report. So, first of all, they burned a lot of cash, as to be expected by a startup in this stage, and also they didn't bring as much revenue as Wall Street was expecting, so the stock price and the shares seem to be dipping because of that. Also, many people were hoping for them to target a 60,000 production rate for 2023, but their guidance was 50,000. So, you know, maybe I'm biased because I just love Rivian so much, but I feel like you gotta cut them a little bit of slack, considering how massive the battery packs are in these vehicles. They're still doubling, going from 25,000 last year to 50,000 this year. Yeah, I know they're not going to be as profitable as quickly as people want them to be, but they've got a ton of cash in the bank and a lot of investment from Amazon, and demand is definitely not going anywhere for Rivian's vehicles. So I know this is kind of a rough stage in the overall company's history, but overall, I'm still hopeful and I have a lot of faith in them. As far as EV startups go, I think they are the most set up for success out of anybody. And it's not all doom and gloom. I tend to try to be more optimistic on this channel, and I'm very happy by a lot of the range announcements and enhancements they're bringing to the R1T and the R1S. The biggest one, of course, that RJ took to Twitter to announce for himself is that they are bringing the Max Pack to the R1S. So similar to the R1T, they're starting it with a dual motor configuration at this time. Rivian doesn't seem to be very passionate or interested on the subject of doing a quad motor and Max Pack, which some people are very annoyed by that, but personally, I think it just makes too much sense. Like, quad motor, it means extra weight, means extra wiring, extra cost, so that's going to eat into your efficiency, even if you did find a way to stuff the Max Pack in there. And if you care that much about range and you care that much about efficiency, you're less likely, I think, to care about having a quad motor powertrain and need that acceleration or that much torque vectoring off-road. So hopefully someday they figure that out, but I personally think that's totally fine. But before today, there was no talk about bringing the Max Pack to the R1S. So RJ basically explained on Twitter that it took a lot of work and a lot of engineering to make it possible to have a 7-seater SUV that is still capable of packing, like, I believe it's like a 180 kilowatt hour battery pack, and they're saying this will target a range of about 390 miles. So that's an insanely impressive figure if you consider the Tesla Model X is a 7-seater, as is the Model Y, kinda, and neither of those vehicles are going over 350 miles on a charge, whereas the R1S is targeting 390. So already, I felt like Rivian had probably one of the best full-size SUVs on the market that are electric, of course, and now they're just gonna top that even further with this dual-motor Max Pack configuration, which they say deliveries of will start later in the fall. I believe this is partly because of Rivian's in-house designed Enduro motors, which in their shareholder letter, they said they're starting this on their delivery van because I guess the in-house design is meant to be more efficient. In case you weren't aware, before the Enduro motor, Rivian was basically just using off-the-shelf parts for their own motors. It was not something that they had designed specifically for their vehicles, but now that they're introducing it in the delivery van first, and eventually it's coming to the dual-motor R1T and R1S, this should allow for better efficiencies and better cost. So that I get really, really excited for, because I was thinking from the beginning, Rivian, you should be designing your own in-house powertrains so that you don't have to be such an inefficient beast on the highways, which it appears is actually paying off. I haven't seen them drawn much attention to it, but in the shareholder deck, they detail the max range figures for each one of their vehicles, and they appear to be updating the range numbers for the large battery pack dual motor trims. So in case you weren't aware, pretty much all the R1Ts and R1Ss delivered so far have had the same size battery pack, which they call large, supercharge, and that has like 135 kilowatt hours, and all of the R1Ts and R1Ss have quad motor powertrains, which, you know, it's not the most efficient design, it's not super aerodynamic, and I think Rivian knows that. They're not trying to make the most efficient vehicles possible, but with that ginormous 135 kilowatt hour battery pack and the quad motor powertrain, they were able to get around 320 miles of range on most of the vehicles that they've delivered so far. Sometimes less if you're speccing different tires, but in the shareholder deck now, they're referencing for the large battery pack, the R1S can go up to 340 miles of range, and the R1T will go up to 350 miles of range. That's quite a bit of range improvement just from that enduro motor. Now, again, these are not EPA estimates. I'm not even sure if those were supposed to be in the shareholder deck, because if you go to the Rivian visualizer page and you select the dual motor large battery pack, there's no range figure. They just say, we're still testing it, we're still calibrating it, so maybe these aren't quite official figures yet, but the way I understand it, switching to their own in-house design motor, at least on the dual motor configuration, seems to pay off with some pretty massive range improvements. And in my opinion, if these range numbers are somewhat accurate, you know, once we get EPA tests, the max pack is actually way less compelling to me now, because typically on their visualizer, they tend to say that the max pack is like an extra $10,000 or more. And now seeing these updated figures with the dual motor large battery pack, that's an extra $10,000 that grants you 50 miles of range, both on the R1S and the R1T, which I know some of you are like, I need every single bit of range possible, especially if you're in the winter and your range is cut in half, or if you're towing, that also tends to cut range in half. But even then, I gotta admit, like, okay, if we're cutting range figures in half, we're talking about paying an extra $10,000 for an extra 25 miles of range in the extreme cold, or if you're towing, or if you're doing both, then it's probably more like a difference of 12 or 14 miles. And is that really going to justify that added cost? For some of you, probably, I'm sure it will, but I'm just like such an efficiency focused guy, and now that I'm seeing Rivian themselves claim that with a dual motor powertrain that's designed by Rivian in-house and that large battery pack, they can get this to 350 miles, but they also don't seem to be too confident on providing us an EPA estimate for the max pack yet. So if it's really only a difference of 50 miles, I would personally much rather take the lower range option and save yourself a whole lot of money. And yes, these dual motor vehicles aren't going to be ready until later in the year, but later in the year, Tesla's probably going to have their Magic Dock open and available to non-Teslas. Even Tesla themselves was shown in New York testing out the supercharger Magic Dock with a Rivian R1T. Sure, the parking situation might be a bit weird and it's only going to be select superchargers at first, but a lot of you guys buying these adventure vehicles, I'm sure, are planning on owning them for 5, 6, maybe 8 or 9, 10 plus years, because these are big purchases, you know? And if you're planning on owning them for 5 to 10 years, keep in mind that Tesla and the White House have agreed that they need to have open over 7,500 supercharging locations to CCS vehicles by the end of 2024. And a lot of people with their original quad motor large battery pack R1Ss are still waiting a delivery date. So if you haven't ordered your vehicle yet, or you're thinking about ordering a Rivian, keep in mind that the charging network is probably, thanks to Tesla, going to improve a lot over the course of the next 2 years, with the supercharger network more than doubling. Like, I don't think people really understand how many locations that actually looks like in the real world. You hear about Tesla people talking about how great the supercharger network is right now? Imagine all of that doubled, and all of those new stations are gonna have the Magic Dock, which means your Rivian can charge there too. So that's why I guess I wouldn't put a huge emphasis on that added range. It doesn't seem like that much bigger battery pack is going to help out all that much, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope that maybe it ends up being way better than we expect, and it's more like 415 or the sweet spot 420 miles of range. Maybe that I could get a little bit more excited for, but just the wording they've chosen on the website. They used to say 400 plus miles for the max pack. They got rid of the plus, and now they're just saying 400. And when you go into the, you know, more about this range figure, they're saying we expect it to get around 400. So I think it goes without saying Rivian promised to have high range vehicles like that, but they're realizing how difficult that is, especially with the unaerodynamic shape of most pickup trucks and SUVs, and of course the R1T and R1S are no exception, and of course the acceleration of these motors and the tires they go with. They're just inherently not very efficient designs, which means it was probably easy in the design lab to say, oh yeah, we could get it over 400 miles. That's just a few more than what we got on the large battery pack, but they realize, like, wait a minute, the bigger battery pack you add, the more weight you add, and the vehicle isn't very efficient in the first place, so it's gonna take more energy to move that vehicle than another, so you gotta add more cells, and before you know it, it's actually quite a difficult weight problem for Rivian to get a 7,000-pound pickup truck to go 400 miles without stopping. It's not an easy task at all, which is why I'm very grateful they're using their own in-house design motors now. I'm hopeful that that will make their vehicles much more efficient than the motors they were using before. But I also just want to apologize to a lot of you early adopters. I hope you still enjoy your vehicle and you weren't holding out too much hope for the dual motor max pack options, because they do seem pretty awesome, but personally, I think the real sweet spot that I'm most excited for is the standard range options, because Rivian said they're still making progress on their lithium iron phosphate battery packs, which are still rumored to have over 260 miles of range, which isn't great, but when you consider you can charge it to full every single day, and of course the supercharger network is going to be opening up over the next couple years, I think those are going to be more and more compelling, especially at their lower prices. And in the shareholder deck, they said the R1T, even with LFP, will be going like 270 miles on a charge, which is awesome. So I'm a big fan of lithium iron phosphate. That's what I have in my current vehicle, and I'm glad that Rivian is embracing it and planning on introducing it in the future. But what do you guys think of the max battery pack options and the enduro motor making Rivians far more efficient than they were before? Are you doubtful for the future of the company based on the weak earnings? I still have a lot of hope. I know they're going through a lot right now, but they've got big tech funding and lots of cash in the bank. I think they'll be okay. But feel free to disagree with me down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. And thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.